I'm going to do another little intro about who we are, we being 350 Network Council. The Network Council is made up of the 16 largest independent 350 affiliate organizations in the U.S. We are place-based organizations building people power for climate justice. And we are winning grassroots campaigns across the country that stop the expansion of fossil fuel industry and transition our communities to 100% renewable energy. And so for the past 10 years, we have increasingly been taking this fight to fossil fuel industry. And for the past couple years, we've been really focused on utilities, which is why y'all are here today. I now want to spend some time to pass on to Nancy from Third Act, our co-sponsor of this training.
Thank you. And thanks for inviting Third Act, and Bill McKibben is here with us. And I just want to say congrats to 350 for hosting this. Happy to be here. And at the very end of the slideshow, we've got a slide about a project that we're working on at Third Act called Sun Day, a day when we celebrate the sun all over the country. We're really focused on solar. And it's going to be September 20th and 21st, and we'll have a slide at the end so you could take a picture, go to the website, and sign up. And thanks so much.
All right. So thank you all for being here. And we have a few takeaways that we really want to make sure that you have throughout once you get to the end of this training. The first one being understand the basics of our energy utility system and why it's not working. The second one is understanding what utility justice even is. And the third being learn how to fight back. That's a very important aspect. It's like, okay, that sucks. What do we do about it? And the last thing what we're going to do today is for the last 30 minutes of this call, maybe a little bit more like 20, we're going to connect with other utility justice advocates in your region, and we're going to answer some questions together and get an idea of what can we be doing in our regions to fight back. So I hope you're all excited. To get us even more pumped, I'm really grateful that we could have Bill McKibben here on the call with us. And I think we're going to try and find him in the participants and see if we can unmute him.
But what a pleasure to be here. I got to say, I'm not sure that I've ever gotten to address a kind of joint meeting from 350 and Third Act. So I feel like a very proud papa here. And it's great fun to get to see all my friends at all the different parts of 350 scattered around the country. The Network Council is the truly wonderful artifact of 350, and I am so incredibly grateful for the work that you all are doing all the time. And it's always fun to get to help out. I'm just going to talk for a minute. Look, you guys mostly know the situation that we're dealing with, and my colleague Nancy LaPlaca is one of the great experts in the whole world on American utilities and what they mean for our energy system. I want to say just a couple of things. The first is, when we asked when you asked for an adjective to describe our local utility, I was forced to say that ours is actually pretty good. Green Mountain Power in Vermont. I've done a lot of reporting over the years on utilities, and I used to say it was possible to list the good utilities on the country on the fingers of one finger. The former CEO of Green Mountain Power has gone on to run Sunrun, the biggest rooftop solar installer in the country. The biggest power plant on our grid is the virtual power plant that they use thousands and thousands of batteries that they've installed in people's basements to network together. So it is possible to get this right, which makes it all the more aggravating that almost nowhere does it get done right. Utilities are, without any doubt, one of the biggest blockages to the changes that we need to make. They are often dim-witted organizations, and they're almost always have managed to capture the regulators that should be prodding them to do more, which is why at Third Act and at 350, I know y'all are working so hard on public utility commissions and so on to try and undo those blockages. It's always worth remembering that there's already in the interconnection queue waiting to be approved by utilities 2 or 3 times as much renewable energy as it would take to run everything that needs to run in the United States. We are not short of ideas for where and how to produce wind power and sun power and the things that we need. What we're short of is the responsiveness of utilities to go get the job done. And again, this is not impossible. We look at Texas, for instance, with their connect and manage approach to interconnection. And it's no wonder that Texas is building more renewable energy than any other place in the country, and by a fairly large margin at this point, at least until the legislature gets their finger in the pot, which they're desperately trying to do right now on behalf of the fossil fuel industry. The basic thing, I think, just to always keep understanding here is that we're in a period of extraordinary transition, and it's a different period than the one from, say, when 350 was founded. The problem there then was that fossil fuel was so much cheaper than renewable energy that there was a big bias towards using it at all times. And we had to figure out how to drive up the cost of fossil fuel and carbon taxes and on and on and on. And that's no longer the case. What now is the case is that sun and wind provide the cheapest power in the world. And so our job is, we have the economic wind is at our back. The force of economic gravity is working in our favor now. Our job is to remove the vested interest and inertia, and those are two separate but powerful forces. Often they combine in order to prevent the change that we need. It's not that this is never going to happen. Even in the terrible system we have now, eventually the sheer economics of this will win out and will do the right thing. Our problem, of course, is that eventually doesn't do us much good because the poles are melting right now. We have only a very short time to make very dramatic change. And so our job is to figure out how to catalyze this reaction. And I'll just finish by following up on what Nancy said, which is that I'm spending most of my time, I'm out on the road right now, talking to you from a balcony someplace, because we're out feverishly organizing around this Sunday thing that we're doing on September 21st. And if you go to sunday.earth, you'll find all the details about what will be the biggest celebration, really, of renewable energy in a very long time. The reason that we want to do that celebration is precisely to increase the pressure on public utility commissions, on utility boards, on regulators, on state legislatures, on city halls, on all the places where we can still exert power, even with the travesty that's underway in DC. September 21st is going to be beautiful, and we need all the network council, all the 350 operations all across the country to be figuring out clever, powerful, and especially beautiful things to be doing that day. We've done a lot of these together at 350 over the years, from the very first day of action back in 2009, and so we know how to do this. It's in our muscle memory, but this will be a really good chance to come together for some really powerful stuff. So many thanks, Shimona, to you, to Dory, to everybody else who's been putting this together, and such a pleasure to get to see so many old friends and new friends from around the country who are keeping the flag flying. Good on y'all. That's all I can say. And I can't wait to see the pictures from September 21st from everywhere.
I'm going to hand it over to Dory to start our training portion of this event.
Thank you, Shimona, and thank you so much for your words, Bill. It is so true that I know we say it a lot, but this work is extremely urgent and starting to make some serious wins against our utilities who are blocking our progress needs to happen. So I am Dory Bruggeman. I have made myself the true Dory Bruggeman on Zoom here because it is my fault for sending everybody a link that was associated with my name. So I will take the L for that one. But I'm going to be your trainer for today to talk a little bit about the basics of utility justice. So first, I'm going to go pretty quick because we've got a good amount of content here. But I know Nancy from Third Act is going to be watching the chat for any specific questions you may have. So first, we're going to talk about the basics of our electricity system. We're going to talk about what is utility justice, and then we'll be able to dive into some strategies, and we'll hear from some of the leaders with our local 350 groups to talk about different strategies to take power back from utilities. Next slide, Deneen. All right, first things first, this is a Utility Justice 101 course. So what is an electric utility? An electric utility sells and delivers electricity into our homes and businesses. You turn the light on, the electricity goes on. That is in the vast majority of cases because of our utilities. Some utilities generate the electricity. They operate generation plants, but some of them purchase energy from other power producers and then just focus on the delivery aspect. For example, in California, our utilities focus more on delivering the energy, and they purchase the energy that is being generated by other entities. But what that means is that our utilities do own the poles and the wires that are required for transporting our electricity, also known as the electrical grid. And another one of their main responsibilities is maintaining and building that infrastructure, that grid infrastructure. So that is also referred to as as distribution infrastructure. That means transmission lines. That means sometimes gas pipelines. And as I said before, some of these utilities are also doing generation. So that means that they are also maintaining and building gas and coal plants and renewables, especially when we pressure them to do renewables. Next slide. So this is just a little graphic to show what I just talked about between generation, transmission, and distribution. So all the way on the left, we see a power plant, which is generating electricity. Then in that, that power plant, that could be a coal plant, that could be a gas plant, that could be a solar farm. In the middle, we have these big towers. These are transmission lines. They're transporting the electricity long distances from the power plants. And then once that electricity gets to our cities and our neighborhoods, then it becomes distribution. So these are the lines and the poles that we see outside of our home. These are the things that are actually connecting to our home. That is what distribution is. Now, these are three separate things, and different utilities operate different things. So I just mentioned in California, there should be, a little red line in between the power plant and the transmission lines, because in California, they mostly deal with the transmission and distribution. In other places, they do all three. And then there are also cases, particularly in the case of municipal utilities, which we will get into later, that focus almost entirely on the distribution, on the poles and the wires, just in our city, in our neighborhoods that are bringing the electricity into our homes. So there are a few types of electric utilities. The major ones here are these three. We have on the top, for-profit utilities, also called investor-owned utilities. These are very large scale. They issue stock. They are traded on the market. Okay, this is a for-profit company. Very common here in our country. We're familiar with these types of companies. Below that, we have something that's called a co-op. Co-ops are more common in rural areas. They are not for profit and they are member owned. And then the next type of utility that we see pretty frequently are publicly owned utilities. So these are also not for profit, but they are run by the municipality or the state. So the main thing I want to point to is this column 3 over here. You can see in the bold letters. For the bottom two utilities, which I mentioned are not-for-profit utilities, their primary directive is providing electricity, making it cheap and reliable, optimizing benefits for local customers. That's what your goal is as the director of one of those utilities. However, when you look at the IOUs, the for-profit utilities, their goal is to make profit. That is always going to be their number one directive because they are a for-profit company. Serving customers comes secondary to that, unfortunately for us. So we're going to focus mostly on for-profit utilities. The utility justice movement targets these utilities the most And the next slide will show you a little bit why. In this graph, you can see two different things. On the left side, you can see that we have this is the number of utilities that exist in the United States according to type. We have very few investor-owned utilities, and then we have a lot more co-ops and a lot more publicly owned. But then when you look at the graph on the right, what you can see is that this is showing the millions of customers that are being served by these utilities. And you can see that the number of millions of customers is far greater for the for-profit investor-owned utilities. So essentially, what is this saying? It's saying that the vast, vast majority of us, about 3/4 of Americans, are using investor-owned utilities. We are relying on them to provide our electricity. Okay, so some people have questions about where do utilities get electricity. So again, this is going to be about mainly for-profit utilities because these are the utilities that pose the greatest problems to us and also serve the largest number of people in our country. Utilities do get to make choices about what energy to generate or buy because, as you know, they are either generating that electricity themselves or they are buying it from someone else. Utilities overwhelmingly choose fossil fuels. So one great example is Duke Energy, one of the top polluters in the country and in the world, dare I say. Someone fact check me. Their fuel mix is majority fossil fuels. Community choice aggregators can give people more choices about where their energy comes from. I will tell you a little bit more about community choice aggregators. Community solar can give people more choices. And then we can also, as activists, leverage things like something that's called renewable portfolio standards, which basically force utilities to diversify their fuel sources. Electric utilities provide our electricity. They generate, they procure it, they transport it, and they deliver it into our homes. The majority of Americans have no choice but to pay for these services from private for-profit utilities. Their number one priority is profit. And they also own and control the majority of electricity infrastructure, which is the grid. And then the one really important thing is, among other important things, is that these utilities are fossil fuel companies. They sell fossil fuel electricity. Sometimes they buy it, sometimes they generate it. And they also have invested for over 100 years in these fossil fuel assets. So they have sunk a lot of money into this. They are fossil fuel companies. It is not going to be easy for them to change to suddenly not be fossil fuel companies. Next slide. Okay, so the next section is another question people ask. Besides, where does my electricity come from? How do utilities make money? How does a for-profit utility make money? And of course, here we have a picture of something that all of us here are very familiar with. That is a utility bill. Next slide. All right, so the basics here. Electric utilities, they charge us monthly mandatory bills. These are mandatory because electricity is a human need. They are essentially monopolies. This is due to their scale, the fact that they control the grid in huge, huge territories, and due to the fact that they are providing an essential service that people, you can't boycott electricity. So in exchange for being a monopoly, and being allowed to be a monopoly, the utilities are regulated. They're mostly regulated at the state level by public service or utility commissions. So we call those PSCs, PUCs, and those are the entities that are responsible for granting rate increases to the utilities. That's called rate making. The utilities have to go to the PSCs. They have to say, hey, we want a rate increase. Will you give us one? And well, the PSCs usually say, go right on ahead. Next slide. So this regulatory arrangement, sometimes referred to as the regulatory compact, between these large-scale monopoly for-profit utilities and then the state regulators, this arrangement has built within it a guarantee to the for-profit utilities to receive a return on equity of 10 to 15%. So that means for a given, piece of an asset like a power plant, the utilities are guaranteed to get a return of 10 to 15% on that asset. So what does that mean? It means that the more power plants and the more transmission lines that a utility builds, the more money it gets to make. It gets to pass the costs to the ratepayers, and then it gets guaranteed a return on equity for those assets. Highly incentivized to build. So next slide, please. The question that us as ratepayers, I think we've learned a little bit so far. We might have an idea of what the answer is here or already know. But many people, of course, are not super clued in to the climate movement or the utility justice movement already. But they are asking, why are my electric bills so high? People are wondering, what's up with this? Why are the rates going up so much? Well, for-profit utilities, they have an answer. They are telling people in very organized, expensive advertising comms campaigns, at least in California, and I am sure in other places, it's clean energy. They are blaming clean energy. Of course, this is not entirely true. This is not really true at all. Next slide. I have a quote here that shows from a study that looking at clean energy standards in 29 states has shown that clean energy standards only equate to about 3.5% of average retail electricity rates. And as we've heard from Bill, in many cases, renewables actually do present cheaper alternatives, especially when you take into account things like climate disasters and pollution. So really, it's not about clean energy. Next slide, please. Okay, so what's it about? Why are the bills so high? That's still a question. We haven't really answered the question yet. There are a lot of different things that go into rate making. There are a lot of different things that we can look at and analyze for their hand in increasing costs that are then passed to ratepayers. Frankly, there is definitely some kind of, there's a lot of back and forth about what role does each of these things have in making our rates extremely high. And honestly, you can really dive into the policy of this and get kind of confused and hear different things from different people who you might trust. But the fact is that all of the super nitty gritty of different things that are contributing to our high rates are not as important as 2 points. Those points are, next slide. For-profit utilities are extremely powerful political actors, and click. For-profit utilities prioritize profit over everything. So they are immensely powerful, they want profit, they seek profit, and they get profits. That is the main reason why our rates are so high, because they can get away with it. So how exactly are they so powerful? I'm telling you they're powerful. How are they so powerful? Next slide, please. Utilities have immense power and extremely deep pockets through their monopoly control of essential infrastructure, okay? What do they do with all of this money? They do so much with it. They're very strategic. They are huge, major donors to state, local, and national elected officials to their campaigns. They spend an immense amount of money on lobbying, often in states that do not have protections for this, which is the majority of them. They are using ratepayer money. They participate very strongly in pressure groups, political groups like the Chambers of Commerce or energy trade organizations. They have very strong alliances with unions such as IBEW, and they have very deep pockets to be able to buy loyalty. And next slide, please. Especially when this comes to literal rate making, they are able to get their former employees and executives appointed to government positions by the politicians who they have contributed heavily to their campaigns. And then these former utility employees and executives They are in our government. They are formulating energy policy. They are presiding over agencies that regulate the utility industry. So what is the result of this? Regulatory capture, intense regulatory capture of our state PUCs or PSCs, and also capture of our local electeds, our state electeds, Congress, and FERC, which is an entity that is a national level regulator. We are not really getting into national regulation today, but essentially the point here is that they have complete regulatory capture. But wait, there's more. Next slide. Utilities also donate strategically to local nonprofits. Again, very strategically to subvert local opposition. There was some research done in San Diego, where I'm located, about this, and it was found that when there was a public power initiative forming in San Diego, they were donating a lot more. And then I think there was some rate increase that they got, / the effort ended, and then it completely dropped off how much they were donating. So they really are strategic about this. And as I already mentioned, they do engage in huge advertising and lobbying campaigns. They do this to prevent CCAs and expansion of public utilities. They fight electrification. They fight renewable portfolio standards. And one thing that I know is relevant to many people here is they also coordinate to push policy that diminishes net metering and is effectively killing the rooftop solar industry, which is a huge competitor of theirs, which they see as a huge competitor. All right, so next slide. What are the takeaways here? For-profit utilities are monopolies with guaranteed income. If there's anything that you can take away from this, know that they are guaranteed that income. They are highly powerful, very coordinated and strategic. They buy political influence, and they fight ferociously against anything that threatens their profits. And that, of course, includes clean energy. They fight clean energy because for-profit utilities are fossil fuel companies. This coordination is on the national level. They have a literal playbook to maintain their power. This is an actual document that has been copied and can be read. And frankly, we need our playbook to fight back. So that is the end of my portion. I'm going to pass it to Chantel now, who is going to tell us a little bit about solutions, namely utility justice. Chantel, are you ready to go?
I am. Thank you so much. Thank you, Tori, and thank you, Janine, for smooth transitioning. My name is Chantel. I use she, her pronouns. I am the organizing director with 350 New Hampshire. I am based in New Hampshire. So we can dive right in. What is utility justice? You may have heard it referred to as energy justice or energy democracy. But utility justice is a movement aimed to hold our electricity companies, our gas companies, and elected officials accountable to us. We center this movement around the impact on our communities, and our demands are simple. We demand clean, safe, and affordable energy for all. Next slide. Why do we need utility justice? And while I continue to kind of go through this slide, if everyone wouldn't mind popping an answer into the chat for this question that you see here on the slide. How does your utility impact you or your community? So I will continue if you don't mind answering that question in the chat. So now that we know a little bit about the movement, why is it necessary? Well, as Dory highlighted as well, when we have unchecked corporate greed organized within the utility industry, it leads to consistent rate hikes, shutoffs, excessive pollution, and increasingly destructive climate disasters. We can go ahead to the next slide. To further touch on impacts and justice, although the impact can be felt across the board, it is disproportionately felt among our most vulnerable and marginalized communities. And two phrases to highlight here: energy burden, which is the percent of the household income that goes towards the energy costs, and energy insecurity, which is lacking reliable access to uninterrupted sources at an affordable price. We can go to the next slide. So on this graph, we see along the x-axis, which is over on the far left side, that as the total household income is lower, the energy burden on that household goes up to 16%. The majority of this burden comes from or stems from electricity or electric company costs. We can hit the next slide. Thank you. A third of households are currently experiencing energy insecurity. This graph is from 2015, and this just continues to worsen with consistent rising rates to this day. We can go to the next slide. Thank you. All the while, we see non-white households disproportionately exposed to higher pollution and displacement. When we combine energy insecurity, debt, shutoffs, and health impacts, we put our community at risk. Things like a sick person in need of a respirator who can't pay their bills, and an elderly person exposed to extreme heat and cold due to being without gas and electricity. And we can move on. So how can we fight back? Onto the next slide. The utility industry is a formidable opponent. Greedy corporate utility companies rely on pillars of support to maintain their power and control over the industry. And our strategy is to diminish their power by taking out these pillars. This is an imperfect organization of various local strategies and tactics, kind of put into four main categories. There's a lot of overlap between these, so don't get too hung up on that. Sorry, I just realized I didn't ask you to go to the next slide. Thanks, Janine. So I will go through these categories real quick. The four categories here, we have stop utilities and utility industry groups from purchasing influence with politicians and from unlimited lobbying. Two is take away utility monopoly control over generation and distribution. Three is change the rules and laws that regulate utilities. And four is make IOUs profitable in the eyes of shareholders and investors, challenge profit-driven structure, or force utilities to the negotiation table. Some things that are not included here but are essential, are an essential part of this work, are direct action, mobilization, base building, public education, and grassroots organizing. We might run a campaign that is primarily about educating the public in order to get to a point where our lawmakers, regulators, and neighbors start to understand and hold more accountability towards our utility companies. In the next few slides, however, we will focus on strategies that implement changes beyond narrative and public opinion. So I'm going to now hand it to Larry, a great colleague of mine with 350 Chicago, to talk us through our first two buckets. Larry.
Hi, yes, I'm Larry Koval, and I'm the executive director of 350 Chicago. We have about 60 volunteers, and we do most of our work in the Chicagoland area and all through Illinois. Bucket number one is about stopping utilities from essentially buying power. Many of us are supporting transparency legislation to make sure utilities can't use ratepayer funds for lobbying, advertising, and more. For this campaign, 350 Chicago is working jointly with Citizens Utility Board to ban ratepayers' funds to be used for lobbying, feel-good advertising, or hiring outside lawyers and witnesses so they can raise their rates. And so to help educate the public on this important legislation, we use postcards like this when we go tabling or go to other events, and we get members of the public to sign them and pledge their support for the legislation. So far, we've gathered around 600 postcards. We're looking to get another 1,500 during 2025. Citizens Utility Board is using these postcards as well to gain signatures. And also, one of the things, another tactic is getting politicians to commit to no longer accepting campaign cash from utilities to get elected to their positions. It's another tactic to take away their power as a utility, their political power. These no fossil fuel money pledges allow us to raise public awareness and reduce our utilities' influence in our communities. Next slide, please. And so this transparency law that we're working on includes strategies for bucket 2, for example, banning ratepayer funds to be used for hiring outside lawyers and witnesses in rate proceedings, where activists are usually outgunned by the deep pockets of those utilities. And this is ensuring that rate proceedings handled by our state regulators are more fair. We can get further involved in this strategy area by pushing state public service commissions to hold higher standards when evaluating utility proposals to build generation plants. In Colorado and Wisconsin, for instance, they are pressuring those PSCs to implement renewable portfolio standards or integrated resource portfolios as a way of forcing those utilities to include cheaper, healthier energy sources in their mix. And I'm going to pass it on to Zoe, a colleague of mine from 350 Bay Area. Take it up,
Thanks,
Zoe.
Larry. Hi, everybody. I'm Zoe. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm the lead organizer with 350 Bay Area. And the third strategy bucket that I'm going to talk about is about taking away the control that utilities have over generation and distribution. So Dory mentioned some of these earlier. For example, things like the community choice aggregation systems called CCAs. A number of states have these, and these programs allow ratepayers to opt into alternative nonprofit generation sources. So things from higher rates of clean energy. And it does reduce for-profit control over generation and reduces the profit they can make from it. However, currently it's still limited because the for-profit utilities still own the transmission lines, the power lines in your neighborhood, and they still control that, and the delivery of that electricity, they still charge ratepayers significantly for this service, as a lot of people in CCAs will tell you. And in general, supporting policies that incentivize the build out of rooftop and community solar is hugely important because it's sustained a huge amount of attacks from the utility industry, because it gives individuals and communities the ability to generate their own electricity away from these utilities, and it threatens their monopoly. So they've attacked a number of these programs, especially in California, where I'm from, and they've especially attacked programs that allow it to be more accessible for renters and low-income people, the things that build equity into these policies and make it more possible to build out. There is some ambitious legislation happening in New York called the Build Public Renewables Act, which was passed in 2023, which sets up the state to build utility scale publicly owned generation. And utility scale just means big in this case. And we know this type of legislation is effective because it scares the crap out of fossil fuel companies, and they push back really hard on it. So New York is a pioneer here, but we can all kind of, take a lesson from that. And then, Dory, Deneen, you were on it with the slides. We also have we can also take away monopoly control from their distribution and transmission side. So here in California, there's a couple of bills that have been introduced that establish pilot projects for publicly financed and owned transmission lines, which is huge. There's also been municipalization efforts here and there across the country, which, get utilities to be fully operated through the local government. These are obviously a huge amount of work. It takes a colossal shift, and they can be quite complicated, but the results are well worth it. they take a lot of work as after they are established as well, but they can be well worth it if the campaigns succeed. And another California bill that our C4 350 Bay Area Action has endorsed, and that our local coalition is working on, is SB 332, which is called the Investor-Owned Utility Accountability Act. And this is really exciting because it would fund a feasibility study to determine what it would take to transition away from a for-profit utility model, logistically, all of the issues that go into that, and start figuring that out so we have a roadmap for how to get away from a monopoly utility. And it also would tie executive compensation to safety metrics, which brings you to our final bucket, reducing their return on equity. Again, Dorian mentioned this earlier. They have deals to get a established return on equity, often with the POC. And in general, this category is a catch-all for efforts to directly reduce their return on equity. So we've heard some talk of legislative efforts to reduce the guaranteed return on equity deal that utilities have with their PUCs. At this moment, we don't know that there's any current legislation, but we definitely want to try and support that going forward, or support, anybody else that's working on this. Changing the guaranteed return on equity can also be done through direct pressure to public utility commissions, PUCs. PG&E in California is currently requesting that the PUC increase their return on equity. So fighting these moves at the PUC is important. There's also, the tactic of lawsuits targeting utilities. We just have to be careful that it's proven that the utility is at fault, so the costs are not passed to ratepayers. And lastly, there's groups in Wisconsin and Colorado that are busy fighting the permitting of new gas plants. This is essential for climate, as gas plants are a big polluter, but it also prevents utilities from making big bank on this infrastructure at the expense of our communities. Next slide, please. So in conclusion, some of the takeaways from these buckets. The issue of utility justice is widely and deeply felt. All of you in this call have felt it. You shared these responses in the chat. For-profit utilities are very powerful as well. You've also seen this in your day-to-day life. This means, however, that there's many opportunities to attack them on different fronts and to chip away at their power. So what's important is figuring out what works for you in your community and using power analysis to build strong campaigns and hit them where it hurts. Inside game and outside pressure is necessary. Many regulators and utility companies are not used to public pressure, and just drawing attention and giving people that are angry about all of these issues that are their right to be angry about, giving them the outlet of saying, hey, we can direct it at something, can be very impactful. A variety of strategies, tactics, and strong coalitions are essential to this work. I'm going to pass it now to Rebecca in Vermont to close us out in this section.
Hi, everyone. I'm Rebecca. I use she, her pronouns. I'm with 350 Vermont. I am one of the co-directors and lead organizer. So we have a moment here. We have an affordability crisis, a housing crisis, a climate crisis, and we know these are all interconnected. Meanwhile, utility companies continue to make billions. As climate activists, we need to educate our fellow activist organizations and supporters on the economic and climate impacts of fossil fuel and for-profit utilities. Utility justice is a critical opportunity for us to do this and unite the fights for economic, racial, and climate justice. And we need to make sure we pin the blame squarely on for-profit utilities for rigging the rules at the expense of our communities, and also on politicians and regulators for letting them do that. So we are calling all of you into action. And Deneen, if you can go to the next slide, please. Oh, maybe there's a missing slide. We are, our campaigns are pushing back against these utilities and winning tangible benefits along the way. And one thing we know about campaigns is that they require people power and a lot of it. So this is a moment to get involved in your town, your city, or your state, and there's lots of local groups on this call who have ways for folks to plug in. So, and they will be dropping some ways to do that in the chat. So if you are interested, look at the chat as folks are dropping in some of those ways to get involved. And also there, if you're not sure quite how to plug in, you can sign our interest form, and we can put you in touch with a local 350 Network Council group. And I will dropping the interest form into the chat right now. And there are, you'll see in the chat, there's some folks dropping in ways to get involved in local campaigns. And a couple last things, just to be on the lookout for future trainings, how to talk about utility justice and false solutions. And now I think I'm going to pass the mic to, I'm actually not sure if Dory or Nancy, if you are going to talk to us next.
Can I jump in here, Dory?
Go ahead, Nancy.
Okay. Thanks, you guys. That was a great presentation. And this is our Sunday.earth, which I had it wrong. I think I said Sunday.org. Bill had it right. So Sunday.earth, where we're celebrating solar. And it's great to work too with 350 and Sierra Club, so many different groups, because we have elders that are volunteers, people over 60. That's what Third Act is about. So when your groups need folks to take action, we've got elders who want to do something. So don't forget about that. I'm also going to put in the chat education sessions that we're doing too. So thanks, Dory and gang, for letting me plug Sunday.
Thank you, Nancy. And thank you to all of our presenters today. You all did amazing. And I do just want to say it looks like we lost a slide in there. That was the call to action that we had, but Rebecca did a great job of remembering everything that we were supposed to talk about anyway. But yes, please look at the chat. Look at the people from your local orgs. They're all dropping links. The most important thing is to get involved locally, which is also me stumping for the next 30 minutes of our call, which are going to be an opportunity to get into regional breakout groups and talk more with the people in your area so that you can get involved. And I will drop the link again. We do have a sign-on form for people who are maybe not seeing a group that is in their city or in their area that they can get in touch with, but wants to give us their information, and I just dropped it in the chat there. Give us your information because you're interested in getting involved. We can try to match you with a group that is either within our network or within our partner networks that are also working on utility justice. And there are also a couple of other ways that you can get involved if you take a look at that form.